St. Francis de Sales was born in the mid-1500s. He was born of a very wealthy family, and his father looked to have him take his place in the Senate in Savoy in France. So he sent him off to Paris to get a doctorate in law. When he got back after receiving the doctorate, he told his father and mother that he wanted to become a priest. His father strongly opposed the idea. He wanted him to get into law, and he wanted him to have a great place in the political life of Savoy, France. But Francis patiently persevered until he convinced his father to allow him to enter preparation for the priesthood. At the age of 35, he had already been ordained, and he became the Bishop of Geneva in Switzerland. And at the time, the Calvinists were very, very strong in the heretical teachings they were spreading in the church. And Francis de Sales worked really hard to combat the Calvinists. It says that hundreds and hundreds of them returned to the practice of the faith because of his teaching and his perseverance with them. In all of the great things he was doing, he continued to preach, to teach, and to catechize children. And he was always concerned with the needs of the poor. He became friends with Jane Frances de Chantal, and together they formed the Visitation Order of Sisters, who were to imitate the Blessed Mother when she visited Elizabeth, her gifts of humility and piety and charity. And so they went about doing good for the poor and those in need. Eventually, they broke into two groups, one that was very active and one was very contemplative. St. Francis de Sales wrote 2 books. He wrote many pamphlets. He had many writings, which makes him patron saint of authors. But the Introduction to the Devout Life is a book that everybody should read. He talks about how sainthood, it's a heresy to say that sainthood cannot be attained by a soldier, a prince, a statesman, a married woman, a tradesman. He was convinced that devotion and spiritual life was very possible in the lives of the average layperson. His books and writings he actually addressed to lay people. And I've read the Introduction to the Devout Life a couple times. I'd like to read it again, because he talks very beautifully about how our sanctity takes place by doing well the things that we are called to do each day. If it's being a wife, a husband, a mother, a teacher, no matter what it may be, a soldier, as he said, if we're doing it for the love of God, that's where our sanctity comes in. And so he has a very practical teaching about the spiritual life. I think it's wonderful. There's another book that I've not read, and it's called a book on the love of God. And I'd love to read that book. I haven't read that one yet. But St. Francis de Sales, in the short time of his life, was a man who just exuded charity and kindness. He was the first one to confront people who were living immoral lives, but he did it with gentleness and charity. He loved them. He saw Christ in them, and he could help them, just draw them back to the faith. It was a great gift that he had. So today we celebrate the feast day of a great saint and realize that sainthood is not just reserved to religious people, but the laity all have a call to be saints, to imitate the virtues of Christ and of our Blessed Mother in their lives. Let us stand and offer our prayers and petitions.